Steve Carter and Paul Hallam. Good afternoon. How are you?
Very well, thank you, Pete. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm very well. Welcome to Series 3 of Recruitment Journeys, the podcast series. You've both been kind enough to feature on these things with me before, so I thank you once again for turning up and giving your valuable time. Now, Recruitment Journeys Series 2 is a little bit different. Instead of doing the traditional kind of one-on-one conversation, we're trying to bring in a couple of recruitment identities so we can have a bit of a three-way chat about all things recruitment. In an ideal world, when I came up with the concept, I was thinking about bringing in complete strangers. I thought it just might mean extra fireworks. But it would be a nonsense to suggest that you two don't know each other. Quite the opposite, right? I think you've known each other quite a few years. Is that correct? Can somebody take me back in time?
Yeah, well, I started in 1998 at Michael Page. You were maybe a year and a half prior to me, Paulie.
It was July 1996, Carts. So, what's that, 23 years?
Yep. And then we worked together for 6 years at Page before Paulie went out to start 6 Degrees.
Were you ever in the same team? Were you ever kind of side-by-side colleagues, or were you always in different divisions?
We were in essence enemies within Michael Page.
Really?
I was running the sales and marketing team, and Carts was in the money-making machine called finance.
Well, it's and we didn't. And Paulie was in the city, and I was in the southeast. So it was more a friendship forged in the endless drinks that Michael Page used to serve up to us a monthly and quarterly basis. And then from there, Paulie went out with Nick and David, and it's a great story actually, because I think, for most people looking at the 6 Degrees business model, the execution of 6 Degrees, it was and it was perceived to be a flawless execution. Like, what an incredible business, just hit the ground running, took market share, and just has gone from strength to strength, and it has. And really the only thing that I think could be argued that went wrong in the execution was the resignation process. So it's a great story. It's now, Paul, you'll have to clarify the details, as I was out in Wheelers Hill, so I only heard about this secondhand. David had a young fella, Nathan Byrne, who's gone on to do great things with Michael Page. It's fair to say, he was a madman back in the day, and heaps of energy and, bouncing off the walls. And Nathan loved buttered microwave popcorn.
Fair to say, think Kramer from Seinfeld, Carts.
Yeah, correct. And he loved buttered microwave popcorn. And so, he'd put the microwave popcorn in the microwave. And our office manager ruled the Melbourne office with an iron fist, and, very much sort of, threw a weight around and kept everyone in line. And she hated the buttered popcorn because it always used to stink out the kitchen with the smell. And anyway, as far as the story goes, and Paulie can clarify, Nathan forgot, instead of putting the buttered popcorn on for a minute, he put it on for 10 minutes, right? And the microwave blew up, and smoke started pouring out, and anyway, smoke not only started pouring out of the kitchen, smoke started pouring out of the office manager's ears, and she was just furious. And so she went to David Brame, because David managed Nathan, and just started, tearing shreds off him. And obviously the boys were at really final stages of resigning before going out. And David just cracked it. He's like, I can't deal with this anymore. I'm done. Got Matt Gribble into a room. He said, I'm out, I'm through. I can't deal with this anymore. And you might want to speak to Paul and Nick. And so Matt Gribble then got Paul and Nick, said, boys, is there anything I should know? And they went, I suppose we're resigning too.
I never knew about the popcorn carts. That's the first I've ever heard of that story, but Basically, what you say is true. I was meant to go first, and David trumped me. And then Mac Ribble called me and said, "Oh, David's resigned." And then I said, "Yep, he wasn't meant to do that. I was meant to go first, Scribs, but I'm resigning too." And he then asked me if there was anyone else, and I just had to say, "Can't speak for people." And then he just went through a number of people until Nick resigned, and then he came to me and said, "Anyone else?" I said, "No, that's about it."
Wow. There's probably, to this day, there's probably dozens of Michael Page recruiters who think David Braham just lost his shit over some popcorn and just matched out in a history.
Never knew that story.
I thought that. I don't know if it's true. I wasn't there, but yeah, apparently it all started with a buttered popcorn.
Very good.
Right, chaps. Well, so today we're going to talk about something. Well, actually, I put forward what I thought was a reasonably good idea. And Kat's, being the creative thinker that he is, came back and said, no, we can do better than that. So today we're going to discuss the topic, something that you both know a little bit about. When creating success in recruitment, what is the most important factor? Is it recruitment excellence or is it culture? So we're going to kind of break down each of those subjects, and then we're going to come back to the conclusive question. I'm going to ask you both, based on what we've discussed today, basically ask you to both to select one or the other. What's more important, culture or recruitment excellence? You cannot sit on the fence. You need to choose one or the other. But we already know a little bit about you chaps, but I think it's always a nice way to start this podcast by letting the viewers and listeners find out a little bit more about you and what goes on upstairs. So I've got 3 or 4 questions that I'd like to ask you just to get warmed up. I'll start with you, Paul, if I may. If you hadn't chosen a recruitment career, or if recruitment hadn't chosen you, what career would you like to have had?
Pete, I think you know the answer to this. You and I have formed a friendship over years of music and our love of music. Initially, I would have said frontman of Guns N' Roses or something like that, but seeing I don't have a musical bone in my body, that was never going to happen. I don't know if you've ever seen the Netflix documentary on the producers, Dr. Dre and I think it's James Levine. So I would probably choose music producer. Again, I'm glad I fell into recruitment because I'd be absolute rubbish at both of them.
Yeah, you could still be chasing that career right now.
You could play us a song, Pete. I see the guitar in the background.
Well, yeah, as I embarrassingly admitted to you not that long ago, everybody keeps telling me that the easiest song in the world to play is Wonderwall by Oasis. Apparently it's very easy. After 20 years of trying, I still can't get through Wonderwall by Oasis. So I'm with you being totally musically inept, Paul. Kat, if you hadn't been a recruitment entrepreneur, what career would you like to have had?
Well, I'm recruiting graduates at the moment, and I say to them that recruitment's the most fun job you can have in an office. And then I go on to say, listen, if you're a whitewater rafting instructor or something like that, it might be more fun. But in terms of an office job, it's the best job you can have. I think probably I would be doing something to do with the environment. I'm very passionate about the environment. So I think I'd be doing something, I don't know what it would be. It'd be land care management or habitat restoration or something like that. I think that is a big passion of mine. So I'd probably gravitate towards that. But like Paulie, I don't know how long I'd last not dealing with people very much and not sort of having, being so competitive. I think, I'm very grateful I've landed in recruitment.
In the right place. Cool. Okay, thank you. Next question, again with you, Paul. First, who in the recruitment industry do you admire the most and why?
There are lots of people I admire. Pete, without being a sycophant, I think you're the best rec to rec I've known, and I've met a lot of them at the time. Karts, as you said, you exited Page in interesting circumstances and have built an incredible national business. But the two that stand out for me, the obvious one is Greg Savage. Greg Savage is a guy that I have the utmost respect for because he gives back more than any other. And I will always attend his training and learning and development because I always learn something. But most importantly, he is passionate and makes us proud to be recruiters. And I think recruiters are often really hard on themselves. And every time I leave a conversation, a meal, or anything that Greg presents at, I walk away being really proud of what I do. So he's an obvious one. A less obvious one, I'm sure you both know Ange Hawkins. Ange Hawkins runs Tandem Partners. She is the consummate professional, and she is all class. And I've had a great friendship and partnership with Ange for a long period of time. They're our HR recruitment partner. One of the things that Ange says to me often and rings in my ear, we don't sell at Tandem Partners, we service. And because they service, they don't have to sell. The two I would say would be Greg Savage, which is an obvious one, but Ange Hawkins is someone I hold utmost respect for.
Yeah, good choices. I think Greg Savage, he does what he does, but he doesn't need to, right? He could have hung up his boots many years ago, but he keeps trucking. And it's funny that you mentioned Ange, because when the COVID shit hit the fan almost 12 months ago, Ange was the first person I called to help me get a job.
How'd that go, Pete?
Yeah, she didn't deliver on that occasion, but that's okay. I haven't held that against her, thank goodness. Steve, who do you admire and why?
Well, there's really a day that goes by, Pete, that I don't wake up and thank God that my Anthony Holdstock and Christian Keogh came into my life. They really were pivotal in creating the business that Sharp and Carter is now. Paulie, Hallam, Nick and David, they've set the benchmark in our space, it's sort of white collar professional recruiter. They're one of the very few businesses that were able to expand beyond the state in which they worked and create a national business. So I definitely admire the 6 Degrees guys. And finally, I think it's, and for all of us, I admire the people that put up with me across the journey, that knocked a lot of edges off a very, very, very rough diamond and had the patience and belief and understanding to sort of bring me up to speed. So that's people like Richard King, mainly. He was my manager for the most part at Michael Page, but also Stephen Moyer and Matt Gribble and Robert Lister were all managers of mine. And I admire those for not giving up on me.
Funny you say that, Karts. Someone asked me who is the person I respect most from a leadership perspective at Page, because I think Page did a really good job of building managers, but not leaders. And I think Stephen King is the person.
Richard King.
Richard King. He is Stephen King's the author, isn't he? Yeah. Richard King is passionate. He was consistent. Always had his people's back, and really, delivered. His actions were his words.
Yeah. No, spot on.
Very good. Very good. Paul, in a moment of honesty, what is the biggest mistake that you've ever made in your recruitment career?
Oh, Pete, there are so many. I think it's okay to make mistakes as long as you learn from them.
Yeah.
The one that gets made regularly, and I learned it very early, but haunted me throughout my recruitment career. And I try and help the guys here, but the same thing is you never presume you think you know what a candidate wants, because I've been burnt a few times over the years of not calling a candidate because I thought, that person won't want this job. And sure enough, if you're working on a competitive job and they get it. So that's one that comes back to haunt, and a lesson that we can all learn. My biggest one is the healthcare business that we set up. That was a big failure for us. We launched a new recruitment business in the healthcare area, and that was because we didn't really research properly. We should have gone more aggressive of getting recruiters out of the healthcare industry. It's something we didn't know a lot about, but thought there could be good money to be made. And, it wasn't a dismiss failure. We still do a lot in healthcare, and one of our biggest clients, our biggest client is within the healthcare space, but it's not what we wanted or where we wanted it to be.
Yeah, but presumably you, as you say, you learn from those mistakes, right? I'm sure those lessons were there when you launched your IT division, for example.
Right. Absolutely.
Stephen, same question.
So yeah, very much as Paulie introduced his answer, I definitely subscribe to the theory that one different beat of the butterfly wing sort of leads to a different outcome, and I'm really happy with my lot in life. So I wouldn't want to change anything. You're sort of either winning or you're learning, and but for the sake of telling an interesting story and making interesting content. I remember when I was at Michael Page, I was recruiting a 250K head of credit role for Kenworth Finance. Now, this was one of the biggest jobs I'd ever worked on. And Kenworth, or it's now Packard, was based in Bayswater. And that's about an hour east of the Melbourne CBD. And on our books was a guy named Zbig Zabowski. And Zbig Zabowski was the head of credit for Iveco Finance, the Iveco Trucks finance business. So he was the perfect candidate for this job. But he lived in Melton, which was about an hour west of Melbourne. But nonetheless, as a diligent recruiter, I called up Zbig and I said, Zbig, I've got your perfect job for you, mate. It's with Kenworth Finance. It's paying a bit more. But the thing is, it's in Bayswater. And he said, Steve, that's going to be 2.5 hours each way for me to get there. I know it's paying more, and I'm like, I know, mate, I know. But I had to call you. Maybe you were thinking of moving, you're flexible on location, move to the other side of the city. He goes, no, I've got kids, I can't do it. Thanks for running it by me. All good. Appreciate it. See you later. Hang up the phone. Started looking for other candidates. Didn't have much luck. Then Kenworth said, we've found someone. And I'm like, oh, that's great, fantastic. Who did you end up finding? Oh, it's a guy named Zbig Zabowski, right? And I called up Zbig and I said, Zbig, I called you about this job. What happened? Because it's like a $50,000 fee or something. It was just like a massive miss for a young, eager recruiter from Michael Page. And he goes, well, I know, I got this call from a recruiter. And I said, listen, I've already spoken to Stephen Carter about it. And they said to me, what would it have to be? How much money would they have to pay you to make that trip? Wow. I said, so I just made up a number, $400,000, and they paid it.
Wow.
And he goes, it's crazy. I have to stop for dinner in the city. I have to stop to break up the 2-hour commute. I have to stop for dinner in the city. And I kicked a hole in the wall at Michael Page, and I drew a little arrow and then wrote Zbig Zabowski towards the hole in the wall, and I kicked in the wall when I found out that I'd been out recruited. So as Paulie said, keep asking questions. Don't just give up at the first hurdle. I learned an important lesson that day.
I had a situation recently.
What you thought is a $50,000 fee turned into a $75,000 fee, Cards.
Correct, exactly.
Yeah. I had a situation recently when COVID broke. I had a senior manager in Sydney. He rang me up. He just lost his job because of COVID, and he said, Pete, I know nothing's happening out there. He said, I'm literally going to go home, turn the TV on, sit on the sofa, and wait for you to ring me with jobs. You've got me exclusively. And the days turned into weeks, turned into months, and every now and then he'd ring me up, so what's going on? I said, mate, nothing's going on, unfortunately. And then after a couple of weeks, he rang me up and he said, look, I've been approached directly by a business. It's a much more junior role. Can I tell you who the business is, and can you give me your impressions of them? And I said, absolutely. And he told me the name of the company, just so happened to be one of my best clients. So he'd been sitting on the sofa waiting for me to call, and my client had called him directly. Now, I didn't send him because the role they accepted was much more junior than he in normal circumstances would have even considered. But because he was desperate, he took the job. And there's a $25,000 fee just goes floating in the wind. So COVID teaches us some harsh lessons. One point to Paul. Now then, final question before we get into the discussion. Paul, if your children one day turn around to you and say, Dad, I want to go and work in this recruitment industry that you've been banging on about for years. Will you try and discourage them? But if they choose to do it anyway, what's the number one piece of advice that you will give your children if they go into recruitment?
Would I try and discourage them, Pete? Absolutely not. As Cart said when he opened, you can't have more fun in an office environment than working in recruitment.
Yeah.
And even broader than that, I don't believe there are many roles or businesses that you get an insight into organisation, and every organisation talks about the people being is what makes them thrive. We should all be very proud of what we do. So if they wanted to do it, one of the things I would say to them is it's not easy, and we all know that it's not easy. But the advice I would give them is the same advice I give them about life in general, and that's really you get out of life what you put into it. I don't know any recruiter that has not been successful. That hard work is not the key to their success. You can do as many shortcuts as you want to, but recruitment is about hard work, and life is about hard work, and you've got to put in the work. Doesn't necessarily mean the hours, but you've got to put in the work to be successful. So, that advice, and the same advice, as I said, I give them in life, which is listen, be curious, and really importantly, enjoy the ride.
Steve?
Jeez, I want Paul Hallam to be my dad. That's fantastic.
You don't. No, you don't, Steve. Fatherhood's about consistency, and that's something I'm not that great at, Charts.
For me, I would say to them, any fool can learn from experience, but only the wise learn from the experience of others. So go in, find someone that you admire, that is doing really well, is very successful, and they're doing it the right way, and just do whatever they tell you. So don't try and think you know better. Just if they say, do this, that's what you do. If they say, well, this is the way you do your shortlist, this is the way you prospect for clients, etc., you just do whatever they tell you and learn from them. And that would be my advice, because there's certain fundamentals that are incredibly important for success in recruitment. So that's what I tell my kids. Find someone you admire and just follow in their wake. Do what they do and do what they tell you to do.
They're really wise words, and it's a whole different conversation. But as we talk about whether you're going back into the office, working from home, one of the things that does worry me about people working from home, especially early in their career, whether that be recruitment or anything else, is I learnt, as you did, Carts, is from the people around me, people that did things really well, people that did things badly. And, as I said, it's a whole different discussion, but very hard to do that at home.
Oh, absolutely. Even when you're in the office, the people that do their calls and they walk away from the desks just infuriates me. How can I teach you if I can't hear what you're saying? I totally agree. You've got to be around others.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. Hopefully that gives everybody a little bit more of an insight into who Paul Hallam and Steve Carter are. So to get into the point of discussion, we're going to talk about what is more important when creating recruitment success, culture or recruitment excellence. So in order to get to the end point, we need to understand from each of you what your definitions of each are. Hopefully they're a little bit different. We shall see. Paul, I'll start with you. What is your definition of recruitment excellence?
I put recruitment excellence down to 4 or 5 things. The first being relationships and quality of relationships. As we try and build our accounting and finance business, and I talk to CFOs, and I talk to them about the relationships they have with Stephen Carter and Anthony Holdstock that they've had for 10 or 20 years. It is very, very hard to compete with that. So, that the quality, your relationships that you have and the quality of relationships, and, as we sort of said earlier, these don't come overnight. These are entrenched over years and years of recruiting or recruiting that person into jobs. So that to me is paramount and really important. The other one is a very, very robust recruitment process underpinned by technology. When Carts and I started, it wasn't really files, but we were working from Lotus Notes from memory carts. The systems were pretty antiquated or non-existent, wasn't antiquated. Now there are really good systems and technology platforms that help you do your work and do a thorough process, because let's be honest, recruitment is a process. You follow that process and your chances of success are really high. It's when you deviate from that process that you're going to have issues. So, that robust process underpinned by technology is really important. An outstanding customer experience, and that customer experience starts whether it's a client from when they call you with a job, and to then you delivering a candidate for that job and the follow up of that. So that customer experience never ends, but should always be refined and improved. And same on the candidate side. What I do know about Sharp and Carter and 6 Degrees is we have two customers, being the candidate and the client, but the importance of those are equal, because you don't have a great recruitment business without the emphasis on both. And then the final one, all those, I hope logical, but the most important is also delivery. You can have a great customer experience, you can have really good relationships, but unless you're actually placing candidates in roles and delivering on your promise of what you are, you don't have a recruitment business. So they're the things that I think are what recruitment excellence is about.
Okay. Steve, please define recruitment excellence.
Similar to Paulie, I suppose what I jotted down was the standard at which you execute every part of the recruitment cycle. And that covers off all of the things that Paulie said. So things like the relationship building, prospecting, sales stage, how you execute that. The taking of the job brief, the interview process, the market search. Are you slapdash with the market search, or you just the first 3 people that come to mind, or is it you actually go through and find the best person available? The briefing of the candidate, the shortlisting process. Do you just send resumes and say, give me a call, I'll talk you through them? Or how comprehensive are your shortlist notes? The offer management process, the post-placement management. So every stage in that recruitment cycle, to what standard are you executing that? And the higher the standard, the more excellent your recruitment journey and process will be. So, that's what I view recruitment excellence to be. Now, to Paulie's point, in a way, there are more important things in that list than others, and I think Paulie probably identified the most important ones. And some are good at those parts, some are better at some parts than other parts. But, I don't want to throw stones, Paulie, but I think probably relationships are a bit better at than systems maintenance.
I think that would be a very fair thing to say, Carts.
Aren't
we cut from the same cloth, Carts?
Yes, we are. Yes, we are. That's why I don't want to throw stones, because I live in a big giant glass house. Yes, but you need to be the more you can get your business performing at a high level through all of those stages, the more excellent your business will be.
Okay, so that leads me very nicely onto the next question. You've very clearly defined and detailed the components of recruitment excellence and what factors into that definition, and to some degree why they're important. But how do you achieve recruitment excellence? How do you maintain standards within your business? Now, if you've got a business of 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 people, how do you get them all operating at the same level of excellence, Paul?
I think both Karts and I talked about process and how do you get them, and this is how we've built our business. There are many facets to that, Pete, but what's really important is that you document your process and you align your behaviours around that process. So that's how you can scale a business and achieve and scale to deliver recruitment excellence for when you're 3 people to when you're 30 people to when you're 150 people, is making sure that you've documented that process and constantly refining and improving that process. And making sure that people are held to those standards when they do that. And a really good example at 6 Degrees is we do quality audits. So we audit people on their recruitment assignments randomly, and they have to get a quality score to make sure that they are up to the recruitment process standards that we require. And that quality score then relates back to their commission. So there is a discretionary component of our commission. And if your quality score is low, but you're billing lots of money, you're going to get a lower aspect of the commission as if your quality score is high. But it really starts at the top as far as excellence, as far as recruitment processes. You've got to have the leaders bought in to understand what recruitment excellence is and making sure that they are leading from the front and learning and teaching about what great recruitment process is. So the leadership is really important. The investment in L&D and investing in your people. As far as recruitment goes and technology, there is so much to learn, and we're always learning. And the great organisations that deliver time and time again have really good L&D programs and their people. And it's not just on recruitment process, but whether that's on leadership, whether that's on negotiation, whether that is having a really good work-life balance, whether that is how to maintain a mental and physical healthy mind and body. So it's that L&D component. And what I touched on earlier was around the customer experience, in making sure the customer, being the candidate and the client, have an incredible experience every time.
It's interesting that you say that, Paul, because I'm going to say something here that probably will embarrass myself more than anything. So I've had my little business now for 17 years, and I've worked with both of you guys for close to a decade, if not more. In 17 years, there is only one person has ever asked me to send a cover letter with a CV, and that's you, Paul Hallam. And
I'm going to argue with that, Pete. I didn't ask for a cover letter. What I asked for was a synopsis of that candidate, understanding why that person was leaving, what they're looking for, what their salary is, and just a summary of that person, rather than a cover letter. Just a candidate summary.
Yeah, and I think I did it a few times, and then I probably dropped the ball. That was probably a combination of arrogance and laziness because nobody else was asking them for me. But then, do you know what? Do you know what I never thought about at the time was your customer experience. Didn't even occur to me. That's interesting. Anyway, I digress. It's not about me. Stephen.
I love it the way Pete Watson always talks about his tiny little business, that it's just such a small affair. He's probably the richest, tiniest business owner in Australia, isn't he? He's been sitting on this gold mine, just filling his 500k a year for the past 17 years. Absolutely loving life.
I wish even 20% of that was true, Steve.
Has it got hot in your apartment all of a sudden, Pete?
Yeah, with no furniture. I've had to fill it out with guitars and crap.
Sorry. For me, and I think I want to build a bit on what Paulie said, because the thing about, there's many common factors, but between 6 Degrees and Sharp and Carter, many things we share in the way that we go about things. But one of the things I want to highlight is Paul Hallam, Nick Hindorf, David Braham, Stephen Carter, Anthony Holdstock, Christian Keogh. So all 6 of us, first and foremost, were gun recruiters. We're all top billers at Page that have all continued to be top billers under our own brand. And in terms of leadership, leading by example, in terms of how you execute recruitment well, is critically important to others following and it to becoming the norm within your organisation. So if you are not someone that is a successful recruiter in your own right, don't bloody start a recruitment business. Well, you can, but it'll just be a lot harder because you're trying to teach people to do things that you don't do. And so, I think leadership is critical. The behaviour that you accept, the behaviour you walk past, or the things that go wrong that you walk past, are the things that you accept. And I know that Paul Hallam is not walking past people in his business executing poorly, because he knows what excellence looks like. He knows what it takes to be an excellent recruiter because he's done it. And I think leadership is critical. I think 6 Degrees are better than us at the things like the quality audits and the linking of outcomes to commission and that sort of thing. I think we're playing catch up in those areas. But the supporting thing to leading by example to leadership is your learning and development and your policies and procedures, so that people are clear on what's required. But for me, and I know that Paul and Nick and David, it's become a lot more sophisticated over the years how they're going to manage a business at scale, because they can't physically be next to people in Sydney and be next to people in Brisbane. So that's when policies and procedures and learning and development become more critical. But for years and years, it would have been off the back of those guys and myself, Stock and Keys, leading by example and showing the way as to this is what it takes to be a successful recruiter.
Carts, I will give David Braham credit for this because, as you know, quality and Q&A and reporting and all those things are not in my DNA. But, as a business, 6 Degrees do a lot in the engineering and manufacturing space. And just this language of continuous improvement and process refinement, I always thought was what you did on a manufacturing floor. But it's what we've actually brought into our business. When you talk Six Sigma and lean processes and all those type of things, and we've mapped the process, we've mapped the journey, we've mapped the candidate experience. Probably over-engineered it at some stages, but it's because that's in our DNA and in our language is why we've been successsul. Because all those type of things lead to what I said most importantly is delivery.
Yeah, nice spot on.
Okay, chaps. So that's recruitment excellence. Please hold that thought. We're now going to focus on something that we maybe wouldn't have been talking about when you guys started your recruitment careers, or certainly not as much as, and that's obviously culture. Which is, so I want to strip this back and talk about what culture means to you and your business, and then ultimately decide which is the more important. So, Paul, within 6 Degrees, could you please define culture?
Define culture. Defining culture is harder than what makes of how you build culture. But culture to me is around ideas, customs, values, purpose, and really importantly, behaviour of your organisation that defines and builds your organisation. That's how I would summarise it. But you've got to be clear about who you are and what you stand for as an organisation, and then it's the leadership and the behaviours that make your culture.
But if somebody went for an interview at 6 Degrees and came out of that interview and said, "Oh, look, I think they've got a really great culture down at 6 Degrees," what do you think they mean? What do you think the things are that they're looking for?
So you're asking me to define 6 Degrees as culture?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And you know what? It's really hard. I was talking to Molly Green about this yesterday, and someone that Karts, who was was the first person I walked in and saw on my first day at 6 Degrees. And I said to her, Molly, it is actually very hard to define culture because everyone says the same thing. But I think what's really important is tell people the story of we've just come back from our 6 Degrees Elite, which is our elite program that we have every year. And what's great about that, what was incredible about that weekend is there were 20 people on a high performance weekend, more than we've ever had before. And 6 months of the year was in a global pandemic. And the greatest part about that weekend is that there were 20 people on that weekend, and there was not one outlier. There was a very diverse group of people, but everyone was included, and no one was sort of left hanging. And people could come in and out as they pleased as far as all the activities. And the youngest person I'm thinking on that weekend was 25. The oldest was 51. Good mix of male, female. Gay, straight, all types of as far as diversity, but everyone was included, and I think that's really important. We talk about family at 6 Degrees, and our approach is one where we look at a person holistically rather than just professionally. So we will help them develop into the greatest recruiter or the greatest leader that they possibly can be, but we also take a real interest in making sure that they're making the right decisions in life without crossing the boundaries, and that's our responsibility as leaders to make sure that people are looked after, and I think that is best reflected in our culture.
Okay, fantastic. Steve, culture at Hallam and Carter, how do you define it?
Well, we've done a podcast pretty much just solely on the Hallam and Carter culture, Pete. So we spoke about it for an hour. Sorry, I'm not saying that to say, well, you already know me. I just
have a link below.
I'm just saying that as in it could be an hour-long answer rather than a 2-minute answer.
Keep it 2 minutes, please.
We've got 4 pillars to our culture. We have care. We care for our people, and we care for them about as whole human beings, not just as employees. So our care goes beyond just when you walk in the door at the beginning of the day and leave at the end. We trust our people. So trust isn't something you need to earn at Hallam and Carter. It's something that can be lost or broken, but we'll trust people the moment that we start working with them. Generosity, we're generous with our people, and hopefully people feel like it's a fair balance between the requirements of a business and what they get out of it. And humility, we're humble with the people. Arrogant people don't do well within Hallam and Carter. And I think for us, culture is, I looked up the definition of culture, and it said it's the accepted norms, values, and behaviours of a group. For us, I think it's as simple as the way we treat each other. And whenever I have a new starter at Hallam and Carter, I always look at how they go about building internal relationships, whether people like them, because it always, night follows day. If they can build relationships internally, they'll be able to build relationships externally. So it's always the first indicator of how they'll go as a recruiter is how well they build relationships internally. So yeah, that's the definition of our culture and what the culture at Hallam and Carter is.
Thank you. So Paul, how do you achieve that great culture? How do you ensure that it remains what you want it to be? That great culture, that good culture. How do you stop bad apples damaging it? How do you sustain it?
Stopping the bad apples is similar to what Steve said, is that the behaviour you walk past is the behaviour you accept. And if you go back to mistakes in recruitment and from a leadership point of view, is not acting quickly enough. When you talk about the Sydney Swans and they have the no dickheads policy, I think we've all been guilty of not acting quick enough when we've got to get rid of people that don't align to your cultures and values. But how do you achieve it? You achieve it by having clarity about who you are as an organisation and what you stand for. So that goes to your values, your behaviours, your mission, your purpose. And a lot of those sometimes are just words for organisations that you see, but we talk about the values of 6 Degrees being curious minds, delight our customers, and those type of things are in our language, whether that be our performance reviews, whether that be when we're hiring. So making sure that if you have a values and purpose that is actually aligned to everything you do as an organisation, and that you measure people against those. That's really important. The other part is and I think Karts, you'll agree with me totally here, is that we have a great culture in our organisation because we've been really successful, and you look at great sporting clubs, if they're winning, everyone talks about their culture. And, everyone's talking about Richmond Football Club at the moment, or Hawthorn prior to that. You build a culture by winning, and you win by making sure that you have high standards, incredible recruitment excellence, Pete, incredible training and development, incredible career opportunities for people, strong leadership. So all those things that ensure that you're winning and successful, because as a business or as a sporting team or whatever your organisation is, if you're not successful, it's very hard to build a great culture.
Yeah.
So that is really important. I think, and when you're talking about the winning or success, is making sure that you you celebrate it and do that in the right way. I really loved what Karts talked about, was humility. Be fair to say, in our previous employer, Karts, there wasn't a lot of that, I think it's a really, really important thing, especially in our industry, because there are a lot of dickheads in our industry, I think that humility, especially when you're dealing with candidates, and especially when you're dealing with candidates that have not been successful, to have that humility, I think sets you apart, is really, really important. And things like diversity and inclusion, having a diverse workforce makes for a great culture, and making sure that not only you're diverse but everyone is included, I think is really, really important.
Okay, thank you. So, Steve, how do you make sure that everybody in your business adheres to your 4 pillars that form your foundation for your culture?
Well, Paulie stole my thunder a little bit. I was certainly at some stage going to touch on recruitment excellence and culture. And you can't have one really without the other. You can't have recruitment excellence if you don't have a good culture. If you're trying to just rule with an iron fist and, shouting out jump and everyone shouting out back at you how high, and, it just won't mean that people execute recruitment excellence. You need a good culture to be able to support you to deliver for your customer, and vice versa. You can't have a good culture unless you're successful. It's not much fun being in an environment where you're constantly losing to 6 Degrees day in, day out, and you never get to place a job. Recruitment is not fun. It won't be a good place to work. So, you can't have one without the other. I think this only jumped into my mind off the back of Paulie's answer. I think one of the other commonalities between 6 Degrees and Sharp and Carter is we're both privately owned, and what that private ownership allows is to take a very long-term view to your journey in recruitment and your journey as a business, I should say. So I got a call yesterday from one of my team, and they said, we placed a HR administrator role, and it's backed out, but the lady that has placed it left a month ago. What do you think I should do? And, obviously started with, well, what do you think? But basically I said, mate, you call the client, you say, I'm so sorry, the person's left. You refund the client your fee because you're not in a position to be able to refill it. And you call up, Ange or another HR expert and say, use them, because you take a really long-term view to your relationships. You lost out on that fee and you had to repay $10,000. But if you burn a bridge there and either try, he was thinking maybe I'll do it myself. Now he's a finance recruiter. You're going to butcher that and they're going to get a bad experience. And so either he butchers that or he doesn't fill it. The client's going to get a bad taste, and that client's not going to call you with the next job and the job after and the job after. And I think often under more corporate ownership or a listed environment, you're focused on quarterly numbers. What number are you going to build this month? What number are you going to build this quarter? Et cetera, et cetera. And you become really short term. I'm not going to back this fee out because I'm going to make my quarterly number. But you got 5 years of relationship with that client. So that's a commonality. I think for us, we have achieved our culture by putting our people first. So our people come before our profit, and their interests become before the interests of the business. And what that looks like on a day-to-day basis is managing people as individuals rather than a one-size-fits-all management or leadership approach. So, again, our previous employer, it's just at such a scale that it was one size fits all. Now, I'm a 22-year-old graduate without a care in the world. Paul Hallam's a 28-year-old fellow with lots of different balls in the air and responsibilities. We shouldn't be managed the same, but we were. And it's just not the way to build a good culture. People need to feel like they're being looked after within the environment in which they work, rather than being treated the same as everyone else. And so I think that's sort of specific to how we approach it, is putting people's interests first and managing them as individuals.
Okay. So before I kind of pin you down and ask you for your definitive response to the question, what is more important, recruitment excellence or culture? I know you've just said you can't have one without the other, Carter, which sounds like you're trying to...
Hey, Paul said it as well. Paul said it as well.
Okay, all right. So it sounds like you're both edging towards sitting on the fence. So we'll come back to that.
Well, we will come back to it, Pete, because you've said we aren't allowed to sit on the fence. So I have made a decision.
Good man. Good.
I'll reason that once I give it to you.
Perfect. So before we do that, we need to understand what success means in recruitment. It can mean many things. Does it mean reputation? Does it mean headcount? Does it mean profit? Does it mean number of offices? Does it mean the point where you can sell the business for the most multipliers? What does success mean for you, Paul, when you think about 6 degrees?
So for when I think about 6 degrees, and it's the same thing in life, Pete. You ask someone what success means, you're going to get 10 different answers, and you frame that question really well. What does it mean to 6 degrees? 6 degrees success is about living and breathing our values and adhering to our values and what we stand for. We've gone through different phases as far as headcount and building numbers and all those type of things. But success for us is building a really strong, sustainable business. There was probably a time there where we got carried away with headcount, and that's not where we're at now. It is about a business that we can build and then hand over to what I call the next generation, and think about that from a family perspective. So we have 10 people in our business, other than David, Nick and myself, 10, I think it's 10, that have actually bought into the business. So, from our perspective, there is a clear opportunity for people within our business to take over from the next generation. And that's evident in Susie taking over as CEO and the incredible job she's doing as CEO of 6 Degrees now. So success is, there is the financial aspects. If you are not making money and not profitable, you haven't got a business. So of course that is important. But the next most important part is around the people and making sure that we're engaged, that we look after each other, as Cart spoke about, that we care for one another. We have just, Ivor Lloyd Rees has just come, the next person to be 10 years at 6 Degrees. By the end of this year, in a headcount of 70 or 80 people, we've got about 12 or 13 people that have been here 10 years in recruitment. That is incredible. And so, it is the humanistic, I don't like the word soft, but the humanistic aspect that is really important to us and what makes us successful.
Steve, same question, sir.
Yeah, great answer. It's just amazing how many similarities there are, because we've built a partnership model as well. So I've got 15 business partners, and I think a large part of my definition of success is the legacy that I leave to the next generation of business partners coming through, that they will run this business and they'll have the same opportunities and benefits that I've had. And that relies upon, or no, that doesn't rely upon, it goes hand in hand with an attempt to retain great talent, to retain your best people. And just like 6 Degrees, we have so many people that have been here for a long, long time. And, 6 Degrees don't have any relationships in market. Sorry, Paulie. It's Paul Hallam that has relationships. It's Nick Hindorf. It's David Braham. It's Susie. It's Johnny Whitehead. It's etc.
Al Penny. Yep, you're exactly right.
They have relationships, just like I do. And Sharp and Carter don't. And if Paul loses Susie, he loses Susie's relationships, and that then affects his business. So just really reiterate that part of what Paulie talked about. I think we as a business have never really been big on destinations, that at a certain point we should look like this, that we should be a certain headcount, a certain turnover in certain locations, certain number of offices, etc. Our growth has been much more opportunistic. So it's been people-led. If we meet a great, Brisbane and Sydney both started because we found great people that were happy to partner with us to open those offices. Without those people, we wouldn't have opened those offices. So our growth has been much more opportunistic. So it hasn't really been about destinations. What it has been about is about enjoying the journey. And that's what I feel most grateful, and arguably I feel the most successful when I look at the benefits people have enjoyed in working with the business. So when people have gotten engaged, when people have gotten married, when people have had children, when people have bought houses, when they've gone on this life's journey and had these big life events whilst they've been working with us, and arguably they've been able to achieve some of these things in a small part through working with us. Yeah. That's when I feel the most successful. I feel the most grateful, and, for the sake of the answer, arguably the most successful.
Yeah, perfect. Good. Right, chaps, we're wrapping up. Let me put you on the spot. I'll politely request that you don't sit on the fence and ask you your definitive response to the question, what is more important when creating success in recruitment? Is it recruitment excellence or culture? Paul.
This is great. Paul. You have to go.
Cart and I have been sitting on the fence, and if you make me choose one, Pete, it's recruitment excellence.
Okay.
Because recruitment excellence breeds success, and success is one of the most important ingredients to culture. So if you're going to force me to have one, that's the one I'm going to take. But I think you know where Karts and I feel most.
If I didn't force you to choose one or the other, Paul, would you be saying that they are both mutually important?
Absolutely.
Okay, that's fine. That's cool. Steve?
Yeah, this has been great because Paul's had to go first in every answer. So.
Been unfair on you, Karts. You've had an hour with Pete already.
Well, this is going to work well because I think that if I had to choose one, and just like Pearly, I think they go hand in hand. You can't have one without the other.
Yeah.
But I think we have driven recruitment excellence through culture more so than driving culture through recruitment excellence. So I think I will go on the other side of leaning towards culture if I had to pick one. So it's an interesting little, it's probably only a 49% difference, but it's an interesting contrast between two. Hopefully people would see us as both have been successful in the industry, that two perhaps, slightly different approaches.
Perfect. Gentlemen, thank you so much. Look, it's been insightful and fascinating. I really hope there should be plenty of pearls of wisdom and some nuggets for any young. So I say young. I shouldn't say young in your company, like you're not young, but people at the beginning of their entrepreneurial recruitment careers, they've hopefully picked up some pearls of wisdom there that will serve them very well. Thank you so much, chaps.
Thanks for having us, Pete.
Thanks,
and best of luck.
You just get back, Pete, to just complaining about your $500,000 a year billing and your tiny little business, and then we'll all get on with the day.
That was in the good old days, Steve. The rec-to-rec industry. We're currently in the bad old days, but that's touch wood, it won't last forever.
Just find us candidates, Pete, and we'll hire them.
I'll just go out into the garden and shake my candidate tree.
Exactly.
Thank you, chaps. I really appreciate your time.
Cheers.